And welcome to today's webinar, Ensuring Sustained Benefits in the Cultural and Creative Industry in China, Market and Advice for EU SMEs. I'm Philip. I manage the China IPR Help Desk, and I'll be today's moderator. I'm joined also by Benoit Misson from the EU SME Center, who will be helping me moderate, and also will be putting some expertise in the first part of this presentation. Joining us shortly also will be our expert on IP, Davide Fogliador. So before we actually get started with the presentation, let's make sure we all have a relatively good grasp of how the webinar platform works. Okay, so throughout today's presentation, we're going to ask you to please interact with us and our speakers by typing in questions and comments using the question pane on your screen. We'll be answering questions live during the presentation and also during the Q&A session at the end of both presentations. So let's take the platform for a quick spin. Let's gauge your attendance. Can you all raise your hands using the raise hand options you can see on the top left of your interaction tool? You see it's a little icon with a hand there. If you can all click that and let us know that you're all attending. Okay, perfect. See that's the case. Okay, well, we have actually about 30 attendees joining us from Europe and China. Jay and myself are on board today to answer questions and channel all those questions onto our experts. Keep in mind one thing, you can ask a question using your mic, or you can just type in your questions. Don't hesitate to let us know what you prefer. And also keep in mind that we often get this question that today's webinar recording will be available for download from the event section from the China IPR Help Desk website, as well as the EU SME Center website in the coming days. Okay, great. Well, SMEs. And quite simply, what our services include is an inquiry helpline, which you could call, email, get advice within 7 working days on particular issues for your business in relation to your intellectual property, organized trainings across Europe and China. We obviously have sites and a blog where you can download all our materials which are in the form of guides, practical how-to guides on, for example, how to do a trademark search, understanding all you need to know about, etc., etc. So please don't hesitate to visit that section of the website. What I'll do now is pass on to my colleague Benoit from the EU SME Center, who will present the EU SME Center to you all.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be hosting today's webinar jointly with the China IPR Help Desk. These are our second joint webinar, and we hope that there will be plenty more. A quick summary about what the EU SME Center is doing. We're, similar to the China IPR Help Desk, an initiative from the European Union supporting SMEs on their approach to the Chinese market, and again, we're doing that by supporting them with confidential and free advice in a number of areas, which are including business development, questions on is there a product for your, is there a market for your product, standards and conformity issues, legal questions, as well as HR and training issues. We're doing that by answering your inquiries. We have a number of publications, about 80 in our knowledge base so far. And we are quite active in organizing trainings and webinars as the one today. We also have a number of databases for helping you to identify the relevant trade fairs and the right partners in China. A number of other services which are also available directly from the website eusmecenter.org.cn.
Fantastic, and thank you, Benoit. Okay, well, as mentioned earlier on, we'll have a couple of experts today talking us through the subjects. We have Davide, David, hello. Thanks for joining us once again. You've presented quite a few times now for the help desk. Davide will be presenting the second part of this presentation, which will be dedicated to IP. But Davide, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hello, Philip. Thank you for the introduction. Quickly, I'm an intellectual property lawyer, and I've been practicing intellectual property law for around 10 years. And I'm focusing on China intellectual property issues since around 3 years ago.
Thank you, Davide. Always having you on board. And back to Benoit.
Thank you. So what I'll try to do in the next minutes is to give really a bit of an overview of the sector which is at the center of these presentations, hence creative and cultural industry. So for doing so, I'll start with some slides on defining what are CCIs, giving you a bit of an insight of the topics will be and the subsectors that we'll be covering today. The economic and political context, regulatory environment very briefly because there are several different frameworks which apply to the sectors we'll be covering, the opportunities, and finally the challenges which SMEs will have to face in that sector, and we'll be closing off with some tips of the day before going into more extensive details on the protection of intellectual property rights with Davide. So maybe what I'd like to start doing is just gauging the audience and going through a number of polls. So let me.
Yes, you do.
Okay. So the poll should be appearing on your screen. It should be the first poll of today's session, really asking you which business you are mainly involved in. So we give you a few seconds to answer the questions. So just now we're going to hide the question, but also get your feedback and see which subsectors you're part of. So today's webinar will be focusing at the subsectors in CCI industries on design, fashion, and architecture. And I see that actually most of you are active in that area. We also have some other industries available today. There will be a general introduction actually on the CCI, so that will be also relevant for some of you which are not specifically involved in those three subsectors. But it's good to see that we've got a very relevant audience today. So let me carry on with the presentation of today. It's very difficult to really give a proper definition of CCIs because these vary quite widely in definition. So, I mean, the CCIs, so creative and cultural industries, which are also otherwise referred to as copyright industries, are made of the creative industries, which are principally the companies which are very market-oriented and driven, coming with a number of breakout ideas and putting them on the market. Cultural industries, on the opposite, are more domestic and linked to smaller cultural communities. It's very difficult to compare CCIs in numbers between Europe and China, and that's because definitions are varying. For instance, in China, tourism industry is also part of CCIs, and if you're looking at the numbers on an average in Europe, the contribution of CCIs to GDP in Europe is about 4.5%. In China altogether it's 3%. In fact, if you remove industry, it would be lower than that. I don't have the exact figure, but it is important to keep in mind that tourism is contributing to inflating the numbers. Obviously, as you can see also, Beijing and Shanghai are coming out a little bit more than, well, they are definitely above the national average with 12 and 10% respectively, and quite a decent compound average growth rate on a year-to-year basis. So what is the framework really for the development of CCIs in China, in particular looking at the policy framework, talking about CCIs development really more as buzzword in China. There's the day that you go in China without hearing about the importance of developing CCIs locally. In fact, China is still very reliant on a manufacturing base, but it's very quickly moving up the value chain. And you've probably most of you have read about China's political message wanting to move very quickly from branding of made in China to created in China. Chinese authorities certainly realize that what used to and is still to some extent one of the advantages of China when it comes to labor cost is not a sustainable pattern for the long-term economic boom of China, and therefore Chinese authorities have been putting a lot of effort in trying to focus the industry on the development of CCIs. Already as soon as the development of the 11th five-year plan, which was covering the period of 2006-2010. I think most of you know what the five-year plan is, but if you don't, it's really an important reference you can refer to when you want to develop your business in China. It's giving a relatively strong idea of, well, certainly of what the real priorities as set by the government at the time of drafting, but very often also in line with how these are being implemented from the central level, but also in the provincial level. The priority that was set in the 11th five-year plan for CCI development remained in the 12th five-year plan, became even stronger, and was repeated again during the 18th Party Congress in November last year. CCIs was really set as a priority pillar industry to be developed in China, and concrete objectives of contributing to GDP were set at GDP growth were set at 5%. So, in fact, when you're looking at what is the current status in some developed countries, which are standing for some at 20%, which would be the case of the US, which are heavily relying also on various industry, for instance. China, with an average of 3%, as we mentioned earlier, still has quite a lot of room for growth in the near future. This is also in particular the case because still in China there is still much division between production and manufacturing and creation itself. Therefore, you can see a lot of companies which are going to change that for the future and focus more at the creative part of their business. China is now at the first stage, if you will, of the development of its creative and cultural industries, which is really to moving creative industries to the central stage in China. There will be also, I mean, the next steps will be for developing a spillover effect into the broader economy, and finally developing a stronger creative society. One thing we have to look at really to understand, and again this is not something which is specific to design, fashion and architecture, it's really something which is important for all sectors, but certainly for cultural and creative industries. The disposable income in China is increasing, but so is also the percentage of it for other from non-food or accommodation-related elements. So you're seeing here a few references to the Engels coefficient, which is the ratio of the expense of food and the total expenses. You can see in China it's been continuously reduced, not at a extremely fast pace, but quite constant one over the last decade, by almost, well, in last the US, etc., it's almost double as high as the average of those countries. So there is still a lot of potential for the increasing the disposable income of Chinese towards other, well, more added value areas and to the CCIs in particular. So what is the regional structure of creative and cultural industries in China? We've got a few references here, and you will see over the next few slides that really, as much as there are opportunities in first, second, and third tier cities in a lot of different sectors in China for foreign companies and SMEs, the bulk of CCIs, if reflected here by the number of CCI companies in different cities in China, is really for rich coastal areas, and that's where there will be the most opportunities for direct partnerships with local Chinese companies. So really Beijing, Shanghai, and Shenzhen. You can see this again in another slide here, which is representing the ranking of Chinese provinces, not cities, in fact, through the CCI index, which is an aggregate index based on the on CCI productivity, influence, power, and driving force, which I won't go in much detail here. But really, Beijing is coming out quite significantly out of the other cities. In fact, provinces like Shandong and Shanghai, which are extremely active in the development of these industries, but as we'll see a bit later, are more or less at the same level as some of the other provinces. But when it comes to cities, again, I think some of the cities are coming out quite strongly. We've talked about the development of policies, and you can really see how much some of the local Chinese authorities have tried to boost the development of CCIs in different cities. And on this slide, you can really see the different CCI-related parks and industrial parks which have been developed by local authorities. You can see 75 parks in Shanghai, 30 in Shenzhen, 42 in Nanjing, 18 in Hangzhou. So you can really see the 2 or 3 hubs coming out here, and we'll mention that a few times later. But although Shenzhen is really now boosting at developing its CCIs, Shanghai is still very much in the forefront of developing CCIs industries, at least when it comes to supporting them through developing clusters and creative industry parks. It's generally a good practice to develop these clusters and industry parks, but it's extremely important that you, as you're launching your activities in China, that you're visiting some of these parks if you want to be established in one of those clusters and CCI parks, and see which ones is most beneficial to your particular companies. In fact, from all the parks that we're listing here, or at least putting the number, some of these parks have got real opportunities. Some are still very much being developed, and in some cases are quite empty, in fact. So it's very important that as you're developing your partnerships and you decide where you want to be established in China, that you actually go to those places and that you identify what's best for you. There is also quite a fierce competition between the different locations. If you look at some of the numbers, Shanghai is really, as mentioned already, implementing strong strategies to build creative industries and strengthen creative industries. Shanghai, in fact, wants to become one of the most creative centers in Asia within 10 years, as said in their policies, and one of the most creative industry centers in the world within 20 years. It has 18 creative industry clusters, which are quite active, and in terms of attracting foreign CCIs, it's been also quite active. It's got about 800 companies from 30 countries from the data that we saw last. Shenzhen also is, in particular, since it's been building its first creative industry park in 2004, it's been aiming also as a strong competitor to Shanghai to become the design capital. It's also hosting one of the major trade fairs in CCIs, the International Creative Industries Fair, which is taking place in Shenzhen once per year. Talking a little bit more about opportunities, and we won't have much, I talked about some of the numbers, going into more concrete aspects. We won't go into much detail because of the timing, obviously, but if you look at opportunities in design, well, China has been so far really a manufacturing powerhouse, but it's not been limited to low-end consumer goods. In fact, China has been increasingly involved in high technology products and is continuing to do so, and has a great hunger of designers for developing their products here and building a strong competitive basis. Some of the areas which are highlighted again in the report, highlighted in the source here is in the design sector is really industrial design, interior design, construction design, which we'll be referring to slightly later on, architecture, as well as branding. And these are really areas that European SMEs should be looking at for opportunities. Another opportunity is arising very much from China's policy, which is really the internationalization policies of China. Chinese government encouraging its SMEs and its companies to internationalize and go abroad. So manufacturers, in order to succeed in overseas market, are also willing to pay premium prices for design consultants, and this has been, I mean, maybe some examples listed here, Hire and Conca, but it's certainly not limited to these, and this is certainly creating quite a few opportunities for European designers and SMEs active in that area. Also, the growth of exhibition and events planning is creating quite strong opportunities for creative graphic design. This will hopefully be touched on a little bit more in detail in one of the successive webinars to address CCIs. Going through onto fashion, well, if you're looking again at annual expenditure, well, just looking at a few numbers, annual expenditure is increasing constantly when it comes to spendings on clothing. And one of the graphs I don't have here, but which we've been referred to in the past, is really also showing that more and more year by year, the number, the motivational factors of people spending more in clothing and indirectly in fashion is really becoming more not a question of needs, but a question of wills, a question to be fashionable, and this is constantly increasing on a yearly basis. If you look here at some of the numbers, there is still a huge gap between spendings in urban and in rural areas, and the increase or the year-on-year increase in the two, well, in rural and urban areas is more or less constant. Again, China by 2020 has set to become the world's second fashion market, and with a plan of actually tripling the expected fashion sales in China from 398 billion renminbi in 2010 to 1.3 trillion renminbi in 2020. Chinese also are, in fact, willing to pay again premium prices for Western brands, which are usually known for their quality, but then also here also their quality of research being in the forefront of innovation and design of new fashion wear and apparel. One thing which is really important to mention here, and I mean this is not typically only relevant for fashion but also for the design sectors, is that you have to consider online selling as one of your opportunities here, whether you're established in China or not. The number of online shoppers has been increasing constantly over the last years. It's expected to reach 329 million online shoppers in 2015. This is more than in any other market, obviously. And if you think of, well, here we've got a few numbers which are referring directly to the apparel sales. Well, if you look, I mean, online sales is maybe about 10% or 15% of the total sales, but it's the percentage of sales, online sales compared to total sales has been increasing constantly. You see here growing from 1.9% in 2007 to 15%, as I mentioned earlier, in 2011. So online is really one of the channels you want to look at. Go into much detail of this, but if I can maybe refer to one case study which has of a company, a small company, which has been extremely successful in their online strategy. It's a company called Plaster 8 T-shirts. They've developed a very strong strategy of innovative creativity and designs on T-shirts. It's a very simple business model, but they've become extremely popular in China. They're targeting young Chinese collar workers, expats, and foreign tourists. They've got 2 stores, but they're most of all active through their online selling industries, through Temu, which is which is one of the biggest online selling platforms here in China, as well as their own website. Going through a little bit to architecture, but in very few numbers only. There's been heavy developments over the last few years, and it's going to continue to be the case as China is growing hungry of offices, properties, landmark buildings, shopping centers, theaters, etc. And we don't have the exact numbers of this, but the proportion of new properties where the creative input and the design input will be is predominant, will continue to increase in the next few years. You can see some buildings in China for the moment where you see that the creative and architectural artistic input, so to speak, has been quite limited. This is certainly changing now in China, especially in the first-tier cities. In fact, the investments in the West and Central China is also increasing, but I think that for most architects and service companies in that sector, probably the eastern coastal cities, again, probably provide most opportunities. So just to one number which is quite important here to show how quick this sector is developing. The Chinese architecture industry had an output increase by 22.6% in 2000, which is quite exceptional. We won't have time into the regulatory environment in detail because I think it's really essential to. But what is important for each, that for every subsector there will be a different regulatory framework. And depending on the sector where you're active, there will be different ministries and administrations that you will have to refer to, including the Ministry of Affairs, Ministry of Culture, for CCIs which are active in other areas like film, publications, music, online gaming, etc. There is also the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, as well as China's State Administration, Audio, Film, and Television. Just to mention a few. What is important to mention here in particular is for architecture that it is an industry where the regulatory framework and the regulatory requirements are more heavy than in the other sectors that we've been mentioning. It is quite heavily controlled, and it's important that you prepare and that you get the right advice on that aspect for entering the market. So maybe to go through the challenges and opportunities. Well, we've talked about heavy investments from Chinese authorities in different cities, and in fact, there's been quite extensive funds from governments. I read most recently 500 million renminbi funds in Beijing, but it's quite difficult to actually obtain them, and you have to really have, again, the right partners in order to be reaching to these funds. Now, it's also, and it's important for you to know also, that applying for grants and loans at banks are actually not so easy. So you've got to also plan your financial strategy quite strongly as you're developing your business strategy for the Chinese market. One point which is one of your strongest opportunities is also going to become probably one of your major challenge. There is a talent shortage in China, and I mean, even though the generations of the 80s and 90s are really referred to the creative generation in China, there is still quite some shortcomings in the education system, which is very much focused on hard learning and creativity is not yet emphasized as much in the curriculum. So as this is creating an opportunity for you as a designer, fashion person or architect here, it's also going to provide, well, make you face some challenges once you decide to grow your business, to find the right partners and staff for your company. Attracting talents from abroad is an option, but they have really to be disposed to come to China, and this is where a lot of designers from Northern Europe especially have come to China, especially in the Shanghai region, because it made things, they had opportunities which they didn't have back home, but it's really important that they also adapt to the Chinese system, because advice and talents from abroad may not necessarily be the right ones for China. So it's really important here again to find, if you're pooling on a talent pool from back home, to find the right people. Essential to build the right partnerships and especially with finding the right clients. Make your business research and market research on how you want to target yourself. Language and cultural issues are also a number of the challenges you will face here. Intellectual property is, I cannot highlight more how much you'll have to be dealing with that, because Davide will be going into a lot more details about this particular aspect. Coming maybe to some of the tips, it's really essential that you come to China, you find partners, be it as service providers, clients, or agents here. So there's a number of trade fairs. One I mentioned earlier is the International Cultural Industries Fair in Shenzhen, which takes place once a year. I think in May every year. There's the Beijing International Cultural and Creative Industry Expo, which I have the link to here, as well as a number of other ones which you can find easily once the presentation will be available to you on the internet. There's a number of other fairs which are important for creative cultural industries, which I've listed here. They will be probably developed in more detail when we talk about those subsectors at the next webinar. Choose the right place to launch your products. We talked about all the incentives that are being put forward, and CCI parks in different regions in China. Come to China, see which are the ones that are fitting your needs. Is it there that you develop most strong partnerships? It's really essential that you're going to spend the time to go through these aspects. And finally, really, you have to find the right partners. We see too often companies at the USME centers, companies which are not managing or not spending sufficient time to find the right partner, and which end up being well, losing a lot of time working with the wrong people. Culturally, you really have to also take the time to understand and adapt to the Chinese culture. Language is essential. We've mentioned that during many of our past webinars in the EFC. It's how you will adapt your messages across to your Chinese clients. This is referred in more detail in one of our past webinars actually on marketing mix in China. Referring on one of these slides here, all some of the other references that we have readily available for you. The Plastered 8 case study I've mentioned, but also Selling Online in China report webinar. So what I want to do, because we've talked extensively about challenges and opportunities on it, I would like to again launch another poll, gauge your view on as to what is really the major challenge which you are seeing on the market, either because you faced it or because you're envisaging this as part of the problems you may have in China. So A is access to information and partnership, B, language and cultural barriers, C, shortage of talents, D, access to finance, E, IP protection, which Davide will talk a little bit more about. So let's see what is your experience so far, what you're expecting from the market. So we're giving you a few seconds here to answer to the poll. Davide, we've got a very high number on IP, and I think that will be a very good transition for your presentation. Let's see what is coming out from the polls. We're hiding the question now, and we're sharing the answers. Just giving you a few more seconds. Okay, well, IP is coming fairly high. It's coming just actually at an equal level as the first aspect, which is about finding information and the right partnerships. So I think that's actually providing an excellent transition to the next speech. I'd like again, well, there are a few references here on the slide that will appear to you in a few seconds, where you can find us, again, the USME Center at our website, but also through social media. And with this, I'd like to thank you for the attention. I'm passing back on to Philippe, and I think we'll be taking the questions after the second presentation.
Thank you, Benoit. Fantastic presentation. Thanks for setting the scenes and for providing such a thorough overview of the creative industries in China, the opportunities and challenges there. As you mentioned, we'll be moving on to intellectual property issues for some industries in China. Davide will be walking us through what IP really means for the creative industries. We'll be talking about trademarks, designs, and copyright. Also about your enforcement options out here in China, and we'll also be highlighting some of those same issues through one case study. And of course, we'll be concluding with a bit of a takeaway message, those handy tips that are useful to you, the EU SMEs, the small businesses out there. So without further ado, I'll leave it on to Davide. Hi, Davide. Great to have you.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Benoit, for your interesting presentation. And it's interesting to see that one of the challenges listed at the end of the poll, intellectual property is quite important, and on the other side, finding finance was the last one. So that means that Europe is not in crisis these days. We have plenty of resources to bring our creativity to China. So let's see how to protect, how to bring value to the creativity you bring in China.
Just jump in quickly just before you present, actually, Davide. Let's maybe take this opportunity to quickly launch a couple of two other polls, really, to gauge what has been the audience, your relationship with IP in China up till now. Sorry to butt in there. David, but I think this will give us a really even a better idea of who we're dealing with today in the audience. So, poll number 1, maybe we can quickly transition to poll number 2. What form of IP is most important to your business? Okay, so this is going to give Davide a little bit more ammunition to tailor the presentation to those of you to whom IP is most important. So is it confidential information? Is it designs? Is it copyrights? Is it trade secrets? Okay, maybe we're missing a little bit. I think, okay, all right. We have a bit of a spread. We have 21% of you confidential information, with 42% of you designs, 26% on copyrights, and then it's a few more for trade secrets and others. What does that tell you, Davide?
Very interesting results. Design is considered very important, copyright at the same time. Sometimes probably designs, copyright, and confidential information can overlap. So it will be interesting to see at the end of our webinar today if the opinion will change or it will remain the same.
Okay. Okay, let's move on to the second poll of this part of the presentation, which is, it's just about to launch really, and it's quite a simple one. It's just to really gauge whether you've been a victim, it's like misspelling there, but a victim of IP theft in China. Have you been a victim of IP theft in China? Yes or no? Okay, so we have the vast majority have not been a victim of IP theft in China, which is great. Okay, yeah. That puts us in a good position. Maybe some of you maybe not aware of it yet. maybe not a laughing matter, but just something maybe we can explore in Davide's presentation. So Davide, it's all yours.
Thank you. Since no one has been victim of a theft in China, I think we can close the webinar here. Now, of course, I'm joking. Let's go through the presentation, my very short presentation of today. When we think of intellectual property and creativity and cultural industry in China or wherever we make business, we basically can find 4 main areas. Original creativity can relate to anything which is going from fashion design to architecture to engineering to product design to music and literature. Know-how and technology are somehow very much related, and know-how in the intellectual property practice, we usually define everything which is on the one hand is technology we can protect, on the other side cannot be patented, but we still keep it as a value in our business. Goodwill is a reputation we achieve on the market thanks to the creativity we developed in-house, and we don't want third competitors to take advantage of. And original services and goods also related to the goodwill, and is basically what we can protect by registering, by giving value to what is called trademark to the brand, distinguishing the origin of services and goods on the market. Most of you at the beginning said that they have never been the victim of that of intellectual property in China. We like to define intellectual property infringement in China as a sort of iceberg, where we only see the surface of the problem. Where counterfeits and infringement is found occasionally on the web, by our distributors, by the sales people, what we can find online from Europe. But sometimes or often the problem is much bigger. There is much more counterfeits, there's much more intellectual property infringement on the market which stands below the surface, and we cannot get aware of that unless we put in force professional assistance and services for our intellectual property assets. Before coming to China, as far as intellectual property is concerned, it would be better to start from a very short checklist. Here I have divided and have shown what should be preferred and advisable, the situation we should pay attention to, and what we should avoid. You will have the chance to check into details this presentation when it will be available on the website, but here first we would like, what we have to do is to make a preliminary check on which intangible assets we are exporting, we are bringing to China when we decide to do business in China. Either we're coming here alone by incorporating our WUFI, our own consulting or trading company, or we are partnering with a Chinese partner. Once we understand what are the intellectual property intangibles we are bringing over, we should register them. Registration in China is still the main and sometimes the only means and the only measure we can take to protect the intellectual property assets. I'm going too fast. Let me go back. What we should pay attention, especially, are every moments, anytime we have the chance to share with potential business partners, we can be the infringers of the future. Any confidential information, sensitive information, which can be relevant to the business in China, especially in those cases where the technology, the know-how has not been protected or registered before. To pay, of course, we must be also pay very much attention and on those distributors and business partners which are promising to high targets on the market. You have something to say?
Sure. Just a quick question. I'm sure quite a few in the audience are probably asking themselves this question. Well, sure, I would like to register my trademark, but also, for example, how do I search whether my trademark has been registered maybe by somebody else, if there's been attempts to do so, if there's anything that looks similar to what I'm doing? Is there any way, can I do this myself? Do I need professional help? What's your point of view there, and maybe you can tell the audience how to go about it in a quite simple way.
To check if a trademark has already been registered. Well, nowadays the online database of the Chinese trademark office is available also from foreign countries. It's available and searchable in English, so it's quite easy to check if a trademark, if an identical trademark has been registered on a Chinese register. It can be much more difficult to, if you're not familiar with the Chinese language, to check if the same trademark has been registered by someone in Chinese, or if something similar or close to the original trademark has been registered. A completely different story is to check if someone has registered a design or a patent, because the patent and design database nowadays is available only in Chinese, and in those cases you probably need a professional assistance to check if someone has registered your design or trademark or design or patent in China. Let's go ahead. In order to stay in the 20 minutes I'm allowed to. Just a very quick overview of the intellectual property rights provided by the Chinese law today for the creative industries. I have put in first the copyright. Why copyright? Copyright is an intellectual property right which China is protecting and recognizing, since it's part of the main international conventions on protection of copyright. It can concern from music and literature to also advertising material, promotional material, and everything a company is building inside to promote the products on the market, presenting the product on the market, present products and services during trade fairs. It also can concern website content. The website content is the only way we have nowadays to protect the content of a website, from the graphics to the text, is to register the copyright of the website, or to rely on the law on copyright against infringement. And project and engineering. Project and engineering can concern both the technical side and the creativity, the creative side of architectural design, for example. We know that in the architecture design, we can talk of concept design, preliminary design, and construction design. Often the concept design takes place back in Europe, where the European designers are working, and then the project is sold out to a Chinese real estate developer, which is going to build the construction. During the phases of contract negotiations and implementation of the project on the market, that's where we should pay attention into protecting the concept designs, the rendering of a new building, for example, or the design itself of a product. On the other side, in the middle of the slide, you see design. Design.
I'm just going to jump in with a quick question, because I know the audience is throwing at us a few questions on the subject there. We're aware that, as in Europe, copyright in China rises automatically upon its creation, but here we have also the ability to register it. Which does that give me?
Even if Chinese law is protecting copyright, as long as it arises, it's very much advisable to register copyright in China, because registration is the first and main evidence whenever we want to start a litigation or administrative action against an infringement. And registration, which is quick, it's not very expensive, gives the first and main evidence of the owner of the copyright, the object of the copyright, and the date the copyrights are starting from. So is the main evidence we can rely on anytime we have an infringement on the market. So registration of copyright in China is much more important than registration of copyright in other countries in Europe. I was talking about design. Design can protect also through registration. Design in China is considered a patent. So we talk about design patent. Design patent can protect any 3D object going from product shapes, original product shapes, or, for example, packaging. Designers often forget to, according to my experience, often forget to register the patent in China, simply because they think that the product is going to have a short life on the market, or because they don't rely on any intellectual property protection or design in China. This is the worst mistake we can make, because once the design has been put on the market anywhere in the world, it cannot be protected, it cannot be registered anymore unless it's made within 6 months from the first sale on the market in China. After this period, that anyone will be able to copy the design on the market. So any Chinese company or individual can use that design to product its own, to manufacture its own products, and we will have no action against the infringement. Last but not least, trademarks. Marks apply to the creativity industry, to the engineering, and to any kind of manufacturing or sale activity where we have a name, we want to protect that name because that name is the name of our company and is the name which is distinguishing the origin of the goods and services. Very briefly on the trademark protection in China, the trademark registration in China is very similar to the trademark registration process we have in Europe. Before filing the application, it is advisable to conduct a search in order to understand if the trademark we have chosen has already been registered by someone else, so if it's available or not. Once the way is clear, we file the application. The Chinese Trademark Office will examine the application. The application goes through. It will be published for opposition purposes. It can be filed within 3 months from the publication date. If no opposition is filed, the registration will be finally granted and will be valid for 10 years. Filing and protecting trademarks in China is easy, is quick, is cheap, and is much less expensive than facing a litigation once someone is copying our trademark on the market and we don't have any registration protecting our rights. We can skip these slides and go to the design registration process in China, which is easy, even easier than trademark registration because there is no substantial examination of design application in China. Once the formalities are met, so once we have filed the correct views of the product we want to, or the shape we want to protect, the registration is granted in a few months, and the maximum protection in this case is up to 10 years. Going back to copyright, what copyright can protect? I just briefly mentioned in the beginning. It can protect everything which is creativity, from music and literature to engineering to project and design to other graphic features related to product appearance. As far as engineering is concerned, I would like to stress that sometimes when we sign cooperation with engineering companies, we forget about the technology, engineering know-how we are taking with ourselves into the contract. That's why it's very important to define precisely on the contract what is the engineering, what is the know-how we are providing, we are bringing in, and if possible, to register the copyright in advance and enclose the copy of the copyright registration together with the contract once the contract is signed. We can skip this slide and get to the enforcement options. Nowadays, China provides for 360 degrees enforcement for the intellectual property right holders. Unlike other countries, in Europe, for example, China has developed quite an efficient system of administrative enforcement of intellectual property rights. At the same time, we can file complaints with the courts in those cases where we are facing a serious counterfeiting and the other side is a company which is also acting unfair competition and we want to recover the damages. We can apply for registration of the IP rights at the customs in order to stop at the customs goods originating from China, so not only entering the Chinese market but originating from China and going to other markets in the world. And as a fourth step, it is possible, at least in those cases, reaching a certain importance and value in terms of business activity, we can also file a criminal complaint in China. Chinese government recently has been pushing on the criminal procedures and on a criminal punishment against intellectual property infringement, at least in those cases which are, as the Chinese laws like to say, disturbing or affecting the social security on the market. Case study. This case study I wanted to show you today is quite a peculiar case of copyright infringement, which maybe in Europe we don't see very often. This is a case which is still going on in a court proceeding, and it became quite popular last year when the CEO of Beijing Soho, which is the real estate developer which constructed the Galaxy Soho. This the picture you see on the upper side of the slide. The Galaxy Soho mall. This is a mall, is a cinema, is a commercial center in the center of the central business district here in Beijing. It was designed by the famous architecture of Zaha Hadid and then developed by Beijing Soho 2 years ago. One day last year, the CEO of Beijing Soho saw the picture of another Soho, quite similar, it's not identical, which was constructed in Chongqing. And that's the picture you see on the lower side. The CEO of Beijing Soho first sent a cease and desist letter asking to destroy immediately that building which was infringing on the copyright of Beijing Soho, but apparently it no result. So it had to start a court proceeding before the Chongqing court in order to have his copyright recognized and protected by the infringement of the real estate developer in Chongqing which built that Soho. The results of the proceeding is not yet concluded, but we are quite confident that the court will recognize copyright infringement in this case. Define the know-how and the technology and everything which is intellectual property assets which is included in the contract. Once the contract is signed, once you enter the market, don't forget to monitor and to control the market either through the distributor channels or with professional assistance by intellectual property consultants. And last but not least, communicate. Legal actions can be effective. Legal actions can be the ultimate resource for facing intellectual property infringement. But in my experience, we should try to also make a step forward. We should communicate to our clientele, to our customers, what we are doing for protecting the intellectual property rights. Many companies in China are more and more aware that communication, for example, through stop the fake section on the corporate website, can be as effective as litigating in court and spending money in lawyers. Communicate. Make a list of all the bad guys you found on the market. Communicate to your customers which are the original products and which are the fakes. That can be sometimes more effective than filing 10,000 litigations. I'm a lawyer, so I should not say that, but as a practical tip, I may say it can be quite effective. The takeaway messages of today, we already saw them, but let's go very briefly through them. Know before you go, so register your core IEP. Use non-disclosure agreements and pay attention to the contracts. Sign the contracts in English. Sign the same contracts in Chinese. Check what you are bringing in terms of intellectual property assets. Always keep proper documentation, especially during trade fairs. Anytime you fear intellectual property infringement. At trade fairs, we can take advantage of intellectual property desks available for receiving complaints from intellectual property holders about intellectual property infringement on the market. In those cases, we have to show these authorities the certificate of registration. Use a holistic approach with legal and strategies and market strategies. Be vigilant, monitor the market, and last but not least, believe that it is possible to protect your intellectual property. Not protecting intellectual property is the worst mistake you can do anytime you enter the Chinese market. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Davide, and thank you, Benoit, for both these presentations. We've received a few questions, actually, and since we're running a tad late, let's get to them without further delay. I note Vanessa from the Netherlands has been particularly active and has asked quite a few questions. We'll try and cover them all, but we've also got questions from the audience from Germany, from the UK, from Italy. We won't be able to cover them all, I'm afraid, but we'll try our best. And if we don't cover your question, then of course we'll get back to you in the coming days. But let's start first with a couple of questions from Vanessa. These questions are directed to Benoit. On your opinion, Benoit, if Shenzhen has more potential in doing business within the creative industries than Guangzhou, and how do you perceive the Pearl River Delta? Okay, sorry about that slight mic issue, but I think we're back. I hope that answered your question, Vanessa, and should you need a more in-depth overview, maybe you can let us know more details about your business, about what your plans may be in relation to these locations, and experts at the USME Center will be happy to provide you with more padding to Benoit's answer. Okay, well let's move on to a few more questions. Actually, I'll try and bunch up a few here. A few of the audience asked us about key, I would say, business scenarios, really. And so three of which are probably quite important, and a number of you are probably asking yourself these questions, particularly if you're operating in the creative industry. I'll go through all three of them, and then maybe you can tackle them one by one, Davide. So one is, what do I do if someone asks for a sample or a proposal? What are the steps I should take to protect myself? What do I do if my Chinese partner is now using my idea? And finally, my stuff's on the internet. What should I do?
What do I do if someone asks for samples or proposal? Well, if someone asks for samples or proposal, hopefully the design of the sample, the trademark behind the sample has already been registered in China. In that case, I can be quite okay into sending the sample and to sending the samples to the potential distributor. Proposals can involve also some know-how or confidential information. In those cases, it's advisable to make the potential distributor or partner also sign a non-disclosure agreement, something very simple. In half a page, we can solve the problem. What do I do if someone asks for samples or proposal? And then, what was the other question?
What do I do if my
Chinese partner is not using my idea? Even in this case, it depends. If the Chinese partner is using my idea and I have a patent on that idea, okay, we cannot have a patent on an idea, but we have a patent on the technology which is developing that idea. In that case, I will have action against my Chinese partner because I have a patent on the technology and idea. If I didn't patented this idea, then hopefully the Chinese partner must have signed a non-disclosure agreement. Enforcing non-disclosure agreement and enforcing a patent can be much more difficult, but as long as it is the Chinese partner making use of the idea, I will have an action before the court. My stuff is on the internet. What should I do? Again, it depends. If my stuff is on the internet and my stuff has been protected, I will have action. I will find a way to shut down the website. I can find a way to start a litigation, to take administrative actions to enforce the intellectual property rights. So everything, as you can see, depends on what I have done before the problem arises.
Thank you, Derek. Thanks a lot. And please feel free to ask any further questions should you need further clarifications. Okay. Additional questions. We have here questions from, let me see, from Sophia in Italy and from Vanessa again in the Netherlands with asking what are, Davide, the approximate costs for copyright registration, trademark registration, and I think we have another question for regarding patents. So maybe for all three, what are the approximate costs to register your trademark, your copyright, and your patent?
Costs for trademarks are quite reasonable. Let's say that if someone is asking for more than 800 euros, is probably out of the market. So in my opinion, between 600 and 800 would be a reasonable cost. Copyright also can vary between 900 euros, less than 1,000 euros. Patent can depends a lot. It depends on the technology, it depends on how much efforts and time it will take to draft a patent. The taxes and fees for filing a patent are a few hundred euros.
Thank you, Davide. And just to answer your question there, Vanessa, regarding how to search, no, this was from, it doesn't matter who it was from, but there was a question about how to search for your trademark, and to answer all of those questions and the questions with regard to registration, you can also consult the publications on the China IPR SME Help Desk website, which deal with patents, trademarks, and how to search for a trademark. The concise and pretty easy to follow guides, so don't hesitate to consult those for further information. Okay, next question is about, I believe, from the UK, from John in the UK, which involves 3D design. His question is, unlike in other countries in China, unlike in many other countries, sorry, in China, 3D design is not protected. For example, a copyright in two-dimensional architectural design does not extend to the actual building based on the design. Can you give us some advice there on how you might go about protecting a 3D design? Would that entail maybe making note of it in your contract to ensure that the 3D is protected?
You mean a 3D design of a product?
Yes.
For example.
Or a building.
For a building. Well, as far as product design is concerned, design registration and patent design registration is the best tool. At the same time, we can file a copyright registration, but the validity of the copyright registration in that case can be challenged once we enforce the right on before court. As far as buildings is concerned, the matter is much more complex because, as we know, in building design we have different phases. We start from the conceptual design, we get to the renderings, to the preliminary design, up to the construction design. The concept design and the construction design can be different, and more than one architects, more than one design company can be involved in the chain of this project. What is important is to exactly define in the contract, in the licenses we give, from one step to the other, what are the proprietary rights. Anytime we have the chance to define and protect through copyright registration, a rendering, a concept design, we should do it. And once we get the certificate of registration from the National Copyright Office, we should attach it to the contract. So basically, registration whenever it is possible, and a solid contract protection is advisable.
Thank you, Debbie. Thanks a lot. Okay. A few more questions. One is from Sophia, and probably I'll provide a preliminary answer, and Davide can then back me up, and Benoit can pitch in as well. When the question is, when we pitch for a project, and this is coming from Sophia in Italy, when we pitch for a project in this industry, do we have to separately register the concepts? I think we're talking about advertising here. I think at the help desk, when we're talking about preliminary stages, solicitation stages, when a potential client insists that you present your concept, I think it's advisable always to keep a few pieces of advice in mind. For example, best to meet your client face to face to get the feeling for their professionalism. Show them maybe preliminary sketches. Ask them for payment up front based on performance targets, for example. You can also seek references from colleagues to understand if they are serious, and ask them maybe if this involves conceptual designs or three-dimensional renderings. You can ask them to visit your business premises. That's really from us at the help desk what we would put forward. But Davide, any other input here for Sophia?
I think, Philip, you basically listed the most important tips in this case.
So maybe she's pitching for a project. I mean, she's not really going to register each concept.
Of course. Well, maybe just you mentioned here non-disclosure agreement. Maybe just add a non-disclosure agreement, making sign in English and in Chinese. Be sure that the company putting the seal on that non-disclosure agreement is the real Chinese company. Sometimes Chinese companies use English names for their company name, which is not exactly the same as the Chinese one. And if you happen signed it with the English name and with the signature of the president, it might not be valid before a court. So adding a non-disclosure agreement can maybe not prevent but alert the other part that you are aware of your rights and what you can do in case your rights are infringed.
Okay, thank you, Davide. Thank you. Okay, well, I think Benoit has also something to say here. Let's pass on the mic.
Briefly, because I think you mentioned really the bottom line is you want to, if you're serious about doing business and if you want to know, I mean, you're eager not to lose any opportunities, because that is really where the problem starts. Very often you're seeing an opportunity coming from China. Some of you are coming to us with questions saying, well, is this a realistic business opportunity? What you want to do is just really to make sure that you understand who this company is, what are their intentions, and actually just asking them a few questions, running a few checks, checking their website is already something that you want to start to understand who they are and whether they're serious about business, or whether they have a genuine interest, what's their past, what have they known already. And I mean, without going into much of a detail, what I'd like to do is to refer you maybe to one of the publications on the USME Center, which is really a full process of preliminary due diligence to help you to understand who you're dealing with and if it's a trustworthy party.
Thank you, Benoit. Thank you, Davide. Okay, well, maybe let's move on to our last question of this session. We have quite a few that we haven't tackled, but as I mentioned earlier on, we will do so in the coming days and get back to you. Last question from Gabriela from the Netherlands, and quite a simple one really. This one goes to Davide. Can I file, register my IP rights in English and or Chinese?
The answer is that we can file only in Chinese. The applications are all in Chinese. What we should do is to protect, as far as trademarks are concerned, to protect also the Chinese version of the trademark. So if this is the question, yes, we should protect the English and the Chinese version. But the filing can be made only in Chinese.
Thank you, Davide. And of course, just to go on to really highlight David's point about protecting your brand in English or in Chinese, you can also refer to some of the materials on the help desk which you can find on the trademark guide online under publications, which I will highlight the link for you in a moment, which really deals with how to define your brand in Chinese, how to make sure you have a brand name that is in line with the Chinese market and how to choose one, basically. Okay. Well, thank you, Gabriel. Thank you, David, and thank you, Benoit. A lot of names today, a lot of participants and a lot of experts. We do have a second part to this webinar, and part two will be dealing more with the film industry, software, and online gaming. So stay tuned, and we'll be communicating that date and that access to registration very shortly. You'll be notified in our follow-up email to this webinar, where we'll also highlight all the links both Benoit and I discussed with you, and the link to the next webinar. I'd also like to remind you that you can also check out the help desk guide on IP for the creative industries, which deals with how to protect your trademark, what you should be looking out for in terms of trade secrets, your copyright, etc. Everything we dealt with today. So hopefully you can check that out on our website. This presentation will be circulated to all attendees in the coming days. In the meantime, we thank you for your participation, for listening to us, to the EU SME Center and the China IP SME Help Desk, and of course to our expert, Davide. Just a quick reminder, the China IP SME Help Desk has free services, as does the EU SME Center. Do not hesitate to reach out if you have further questions. You'll be able to ask us questions at question@china-ipihelpdesk.eu. Maybe you can remind our audience what it is for the USME Center, Benoit. The inquiry service.
So you can send all your, the best is that you actually register directly on the website, but alternatively we're still taking some emails at inquiries@usmecenter.org.cn.
Thanks a lot, Benoit. On that note, have a great evening or great lunch for those of you in Europe. We look forward to having you on our upcoming webinars. That's really it from us in Beijing. Have a great day. Bye-bye.